Hi everyone! Welcome to another episode of Deaver Farm Explorers. It's me, Farmer DJ, and I'm here at the Deaver Wellness Farm at Lankenau Medical Center, and we are getting together this week to talk all about food systems, which basically means how all the food that we eat gets from the farm to our plates and into our bellies, right? So as always, the first thing we're gonna do is take a walk around the farm and look at all of the incredible things that are happening now that it is fully summertime. And then we'll get started on our lesson, talking about what makes up the different parts of the food system. We talked about how all food is traced back to soil, but now we're gonna find out all of the different steps that happen between the soil and our plate. So let's head on into the farm and check on some of our plant friends. As you can see, there are a lot of different things happening on the farm this time of year. It's midsummer, so that means that there's a lot of sunshine and there's a lot of warmth, and that means that a lot of our plants are just taking off and growing so fast. There are a lot of flowers that are blooming, and there are a lot of fruits that are ripening. So let's take a look around and check out what's blooming and what's ripening here on the farm. One of the most exciting blooms on the farm this time of year are the blooms on our herb plants. So here we have some anise hyssop, we also have some catmint, and over here we have some bee balm. And I think you can already see why we call it bee balm. Bee balm, which is also called Monarda, is a flowering herb that is good for pollinators, as we can see, but it's also good for humans. This is another one of these medicinal plants like we saw last week. And bee balm can be made into a tea. The flowers, you pick the flowers off, you dry them off, just like we talked about with the chamomile. And the tea can be really good for a cold. It can be soothing for a sore throat, and it also helps with digestion. Even though we know these flowers are obviously really nice to look at, right? They're beautiful, they have all these bright colors. They're also really important to the farm because they attract pollinators. So we've talked about that a little bit before, but in 2 weeks, we're gonna have a lesson all about the ecosystem of the farm and how we use flowers and other plants to attract beneficial insects and create our very own little ecosystem here on the farm. So stay tuned for that episode. We learn all about pollinators. Now that we've seen what flowers are blooming, let's take a look at some fruits that are ripening. Like, how about these tomatoes right here? So we've talked about the process of pollination, right? So that's when a plant produces a flower, the flower blooms, it attracts an insect friend, it gets pollinated, and because of that pollination, the flower turns into a fruit, right? So after the fruit grows on that plant, something else might start happening to it. And if we look a little bit closer at these tomatoes, we can take a guess at what's starting to happen. As we can see, once the fruit develops on the plant, it starts out green, and then slowly it turns red, right? And we know that the tomato is ripe when it turns red. So that's the ripening process. It's when the fruit grows and it starts out as one color, it's not quite sweet yet, it's not quite ready to eat. We have to wait a little bit longer and let the sun help in the process of ripening. And soon enough, we get a beautiful red tomato that's ready to pick and eat. Another plant that likes to ripen before it's ready to eat are peppers. Now, even though that there are some peppers that we do eat when they're green, like this green bell pepper right here, we know that the ripening process will help that fruit get a little bit sweeter. So if we think about a red pepper, if you've ever had a red bell pepper, they're definitely sweeter than the green ones, right? So a green bell pepper is just an unripe bell pepper, and the red one is the ripe one, so that's why it's a little bit sweeter. Speaking of peppers, here's another pepper plant that ripens a little bit differently, and this is one of my favorite plants to grow on the farm. This is called the Buena Mulata pepper, and this pepper is really fun to grow on the farm because instead of starting out green and turning to orange or red like most of our tomatoes and peppers that we grow here on the farm, this pepper, which is a little bit spicy, starts out as purple and turns to pink, then to orange, then to a really lovely red color as it ripens. Another exciting update on the farm this week is about our garlic. And if you'll notice something about the garlic, it's missing, right? It's all been harvested. Let's take a look and see how Farmer Jen was harvesting the garlic this morning. The garlic harvest is a very exciting time of year at the farm. It's also a great example of the first step in our food systems journey, which is the harvesting or the production of our food. Other steps in this process that we're going to look at today are distribution, processing, marketing, purchasing, preparation and consumption, and waste. Because we like to look at our food system as a cycle, so as a continuous circle, and because we know now that waste can also mean compost, which is a way of recycling, we can see that the end of this food system cycle can also be the beginning. So the waste part of the cycle can also lead to composting, which feeds the production part or the farming part of the cycle. So let's look at the different ways that each of these components operate in the way that we know them, and let's see how we can go through the whole food system and come right back to the beginning here at the farm. So the very first step in the food system is what we would call production. But to us as farmers, that means harvest. So let's go through a harvest day here on the farm and see how we get these plants, the edible plants that we grow, out of the ground, washed and ready to be eaten by our community here. As we learn about the different parts of the food system, we are going to come back to this idea of sustainability. Remember last time we defined sustainability as a way to care for the planet and care for people and the environment in a way that makes sure that it will last and thrive for a very, very long time. So when we think about the different parts of our food system, we know that there are ways to practice sustainability at every level of our food system, from the growing of our food to the preparation and eating of our food to the waste, as we just talked about with composting. This part of the process, the distributing of the food, is a great time to talk about local food versus not local food. So this is one of the ways that we can think about sustainability when we're talking about our food system. So a local food system is always more sustainable than a non-local food system, right? Because if we think about the time and the distance it takes for food to get from where it's grown to where it's eaten, the shorter that distance is, the better it is for the planet and for the food, right? So if we think about a tomato that's grown here in Pennsylvania and it's eaten by someone in Pennsylvania, then we know that it's not traveling that far. We're not using a lot of gas in a big truck, right? The fruit is harvested when it's ripe, so it's full of nutrients, and it gets right to the person that's ready to eat it. But if we think about a tomato that's grown all the way in California and it has to get all the way to Pennsylvania for someone to eat, that's a lot of those natural resources that we talked about last time. So the gas, the energy, everything it takes to get that tomato all the way from California to Pennsylvania makes that exchange a little bit less sustainable. So it's a little bit harder on the environment. So the distribution process in our food system can look really different depending on where the food is going, right? So our distribution process here at the farm is really simple and close and pretty sustainable, because all of the food that we grow is going to people right here in our neighborhood, thanks to some of our partners that come and pick up the food when it's harvested, and they bring it right to the homes of folks in our neighborhood who really need access to that fresh food here in West Philadelphia. So this distribution process is basically the process of picking up the food from where it's grown and bringing it to where it's going to be either purchased, so bought somewhere at a market or a grocery store, or to where it's going to be processed. So one of the possible next steps in our food system would be processing. The processing part of our food system is the part where a fresh food, like a fruit or a vegetable, is made into another kind of food product. So we can think about strawberries being made into strawberry jam. We can think about tomatoes being made into tomato sauce. So that distribution process, sometimes it's us buying the food directly, the fresh food itself. Sometimes it's a big truck taking a whole load of tomatoes or a whole load of strawberries from that farm and bringing it to a processing plant where it can be made into something else that we would then buy. So the next step in our food system would be marketing and purchasing. So this is when you go to the grocery store and you buy a fruit or a vegetable or one of those prepared or processed products, right? This can also mean going to a farmer's market, and that would be one of the ways to participate in your local food system, right? If you can find a local farmer's market, usually they're only selling food that was grown local to that area. So here in Philadelphia, we have a lot of really great farmers markets, and I thought it would be fun to see how some of our friends are shopping at the farmers market this week. Let's go check it out. All right, so now that we have visited our local farmers market and bought some delicious fresh foods from our local farmers, what's the next thing we might want to do with them? Prepare them and eat them, right? This is our favorite part of the food system because it means that we are getting to eat all of that delicious fresh food or delicious prepared foods. So the preparation part of the food system sometimes can mean going to your favorite restaurant, right? The preparation of the food takes place sometimes in a kitchen if we go out to eat or if we're picking up food from somewhere. Or it can also just mean preparing food, making a cool recipe in your kitchen with your friends and family. And the most important part of this process is the eating, right? This is how we participate in our food system every single day. Everyone that eats, which is everybody, is participating in their food system every day because we all eat food. So that's why it's important for us to learn about our food system, because we all eat food, and this is a very important part of that process, is the consumption of our food. One of the ways that we can practice sustainability in this part of our food system is something that we talked all about last week, right? Which is eating with the seasons. So every time you eat seasonally or you decide to make a seasonal recipe, you're using ingredients that are ripe or that are ready right now at this time in the year. You're practicing sustainability in this part of our food system. And it's something that everyone can do, no matter where you are, is finding foods that are ripe and ready to eat at that time of year and getting them locally from a local farmer and preparing them yourself, sharing it with your friends and family, and practicing sustainability at this stage of our food system. The very last step in our food system that we said is the end of the cycle, so it can also be the beginning, is our old friend, the compost, right? So this part of the food system is the waste part. So after all the other steps in our food system, the growing, the processing, distributing, purchasing, preparing, and eating, we're left with some waste, right? So if we turn that waste into compost, where is that compost going to want to go? Right back here on the farm, right? Which feeds the very first step of growing the food. So this is why we call it a food cycle. When it's a sustainable and healthy food cycle, it's constantly feeding back from the end to the beginning. And when it's not sustainable, it ends right at the waste step, and we never get to recycle those resources back into the growing of more food and producing of more food. So that's why we talk about sustainability when we talk about our food system.